Yes, ma'am, you are live now. You may begin, please.
Okay, ma'am. Good morning. We'll begin with Unit 2 today. Unit 2 deals with reading skills. This is the syllabus for reading skills. We'll be reading about close reading, skimming, and scanning. So, the first point that we come to is what is reading? Reading has been defined as understanding a piece of writing because a piece of writing consists of layers, multiple layers, and as a reader, our role is to comprehend it thoroughly, as is visible on your screen. Reading implies that you have to comprehend the written piece thoroughly. How do we comprehend? We comprehend by analyzing, by synthesizing, and interpreting, simultaneously also evaluating. When we read, we are giving the text our attention so that we are able to understand the main idea, and not just the main idea but also the minor ideas, the supporting ideas which contribute to that main idea. So the major component, which is the central idea of the text, and the minor component, which is the supporting idea of the text, contributes in our total understanding of it. Close reading is a kind of reading done with a magnifying glass. So, with this reference that it is done with a magnifying glass, we are referring to the multiple techniques of reading we have. Going into the teaching to each detail of the text so that the given text is comprehended minutely. We have to observe the details, we have to pick on the main idea, we have to pick on the details, we have to understand the supporting idea, and while we are evaluating, while we are creating meaning, we have to combine our supporting idea with our central idea, and this is synthesis after analyzing. So close reading helps us in developing critical thinking. This particular definition is from the book Communication Theory by Professor Devdulal Haldar and Professor Prerna Malhotra. I am referring to the study material that has been prepared by Professor Devdulal Haldar, and so this, if I come to the study material, this is the definition that is also again given in the study material, that it is a process, which helps us in effectively understand, in properly understand, evaluate, synthesize, comprehend, as well as create a meaning. So, what is this meaning that is being hinted towards? And also, when we are talking about meaning and a hawkeye view for details, what techniques imply, or what techniques do we refer to understand these details? While reading is not merely pleasure, also pleasure, it is also simultaneously examination of general information, of specific knowledge, problem solving, drawing logic. So, coming to the techniques of reading, the first technique of reading that we have is scanning. The second technique of reading that we have is skimming. The third technique of reading that we have is intensive reading. And the fourth technique of reading that we have is extensive reading. When I say that reading implies we have to comprehend the idea, and comprehension does not only mean we are understanding what the central idea is and what the supporting idea is. The differentiation between the central and the supporting idea is not merely reading. Neither is reading going through the work and picking on few specific points. It is also a type of reading. It is not reading though, right? It is a type of reading. Hence, understanding the technique of reading, sometimes when we have to just find out a specific information, that would be called scanning. But even while we are scanning, we are only able to find out that specific information when you are aware about the title of the work, when you are aware about the context of the work, when you do know what has been said by the writer, what is this piece about, and what the major argument is. That is why you're trying to find the supporting ideas to that major argument. right? This is scanning. So for specific purposes, sometimes we scan through the information and we pick on that specific information. Now, the second type of technique of reading is skimming. What is skimming? Skimming has been defined as a kind of reading where we quickly go through the text. Right here, we are quickly going through the text and getting an overview of the text. So when we quickly go through the text, we are not deeply investing our time in understanding each and every aspect of the text. Rather, we are making the reading data table quickly. We pick on a few points and we table that up. Then comes intensive reading, which is also the actual definition of close reading, which is where you are applying scanning, where you are applying skimming, and simultaneously after applying skimming, after applying scanning, you are looking at the possible minutest detail. It could be a particular word, it could be a particular phrase, it could be a particular line. You comprehend it, you understand it, and simultaneously you also understand that how does the supporting idea contribute to your major idea, central idea, the main idea. Now comes the fourth technique of reading, that is known as extensive reading. In extensive reading, we are reading through the text and we do not stop while we are reading the text. We are going through the text and we might come across a word. Let's say we come across a difficult word. Rather than stopping and opening a dictionary and finding out the meaning for that word, we are reading it for pleasure. We are, for example, reading a novel. Extensive reading is also known as pleasure reading. The differences between the four types of reading are quite easy to make out. Scanning is looking for specific information. Skimming is a cursory overview of the general information. While scanning is specific, skimming is general. Intensive is looking for the minutest detail, while your extensive reading is also known as pleasure reading. Hence, reading has been defined as not just pleasure but also examination, general information, specific knowledge, problem solving, drawing logic, etc. Now, coming to the other definition of reading that we have, which would lead us to the better understanding of reading, is L.M. Rosenblatt in 1960 in her work Literature, The Reader's Role, says that reading is emotional and intellectual process, actively applying your emotions and intellectual abilities to understand a work. So it is not merely emotional, neither is it merely intellectually applying your comprehension, understanding, evaluation of the work. So reading, that is how we are developing the critical reflection of the work. Similarly, another definition for reading that we have is by Doris M. Lee in her work, What is Reading? This work was published in 1969. And she says that the answer for what is reading is, it can be divided into two components. The first is where we are merely translating. For example, when you are merely translating in terms of extensive reading or skimming. Right, but when we create a personal meaning, what do we do? We scan and we intensively read. Because what is scanning? Scanning is looking for a specific information, and you're only able to find out that specific information if you do know what the context actually is, if you do know the details of it. Right. So you are scanning, and when you are intensively reading, we are creating a personal meaning. So reading, hence this culminates, or it brings together the definitions we have come across so far, that reading is understanding the multiple layers of meaning. Second is reading in creation of a critical reflection is both an intellectual and emotional process. And the third definition, that it is simultaneously translating symbols as well as bringing personal meaning to the printed page. So this bringing personal meaning to the printed page and understanding the understanding what is applying intellectual abilities to while we are reading, and how do we develop a critical reflection. Let us begin our discussion on it with understanding how many types of meanings we have. We have 4 types of meanings. We have grammatical meaning, we have referential meaning, we have connotative meaning, and we have socio-cultural meaning. What is grammatical meaning? Grammatical meaning is linguistic in nature, which is the study of language, where we look at the grammatical signals, we look at the grammar, we look at if the work if it is had, if it is has, if it is was, if it is, or if it is will be. So that is the grammatical meaning. Then the referential meaning, and these are the extra linguistic features. These are allusions, similes, metaphors if we talk about figurative language. Apart from it, these extra linguistic features also refer to symbolism in the work, reference in the work. Then comes the connotative meaning. The connotative meaning is the value associated with a certain word. What is this value associated with a certain word? For example, let us come to this reading comprehension that has been given, and also let's finally also come to the socio-cultural meaning. The socio-cultural meaning is the social and cultural meaning that is associated with the word or the expression. So for the better understanding of it, let us come to this reading, this reading comprehension exercise that has been given in your study material. The news media are in crisis across the developed world. Journalism, as we know, it is being described obviously with some exaggeration as collapsing, disintegrating in meltdown. In this digital age, there is a gloom in most developed country or mature media markets over the future of newspapers and also broadcast television. 2 decades after a call issued from a conference in Windhoek, Namibia, from the establishment of World Press Freedom Day, the arrival of digital revolution, the evolution of internet, the emergence of new forms of media, and the rise of online social networks has shaped the media landscape and made the press of 2011 something that those gathered in Windhoek in 1911 could not have imagined. There is a strong sense that the news industry is no longer in control of its own future, and that it is technology companies like Google and social media that lead the way and look set to hegemonize the public space that once belonged to the news media. The global financial crisis and economic slowdown of 2008-2009 sent several Western media organizations into a tailspin. Advertising revenues, the lifeline of the newspaper industry, took a body blow during this period. Many newspapers whose strength had been sapped and whose situational advantages had been undermined over the years went into bankruptcy or protection against bankruptcy. The New York Times was bailed out by an emergency loan of US $250 million from Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim to help the newspaper company finance its business. 10 of thousands of journalists lost their jobs in the United States, where newsrooms are 30% smaller than in 2000 and across Europe. There has been some recovery, or to be more precise, a slowdown in the decline beginning mid 2010, but printed newspaper circulation and readership are in irreversible decline across the developed world. They have been in steady, long-term secular decline much before the recent recession hit these countries and their news media. Circulation is like the sun. It continues to rise in the east and decline in the west. Christoph Rees, Chief Executive Officer of the World Association of Newspaper and News Publishers, Van Ifra, told those assembled in the World Newspaper Congress and World Editors Forum in Vienna in October 2011. His presentation of World Press Trends 2011, the annual survey done by Van Ifra, focused on 6 key areas: the media consumption shift, economic developments, newspaper circulation and number of titles, advertising expenditure by media, newspaper revenue, and internet versus mobile. There are clear sense in the Vienna gathering that a historical era for the news media was coming to an end, and they had entered, even if differentially across the world, an indeterminate period of uncertainty. With the changes in audience behavior and news consumption accompanying the migration to the web and to mobile platforms gathering pace, the big challenge for traditional news business is engagement of the audience that is getting away, with a grim financial implication. So the term grim right here. So far, we have discussed how the changing revenue systems, the revenue which we draw from the engagement through advertisement has impacted along with the economic slowdown. The traditional as well as the modern media market. By that, the audio-visual television media market. Now, one aspect of looking at grim, as we know, grim in general context is sadness, something imbued with sadness, right? But do you think this is what is meant by when we look at this phrase, let's say, with grim financial implications? Right. If the financial implication is grim here does not imply that it is imbued with sadness. Rather, because the piece, as we can make out, is looking for both problems and possible solutions. This grimness here then would imply that it is bleak. So rather than going by, because a word has multiple meanings, so rather than going by that term as to what is appropriate for the context here, right? So we have always been extremely efficient in using the time of our readers. Riz told his audience in Vienna, but now we are in more challenging environment because readers are more promiscuous. They have more choices. They read newspapers with less frequency. We have to do more to attract them, find new ways to garner loyalty. These industry-wide trends and the accompanying stresses, pessimism and disarray have already taken a big toll of independent and resourceful journalism in the developed world. According to the report titled The Reconstruction of American Journalism, commissioned and published by the Journalism School of Columbia University, New York, the era of dominant newspapers and influential network news divisions is giving way to one in which the gathering and distribution of news is more widely dispersed, and the economic foundation of US newspapers is collapsing. Newspapers, the country's chief source of independent reporting, are shrinking literally, with fewer journalists reporting less news in fewer pages. The situation and prospect of broadcast television, which still commands a big audience across the world and remains the world's premier advertising media, do not seem much brighter. Now let us come to the word itself, understanding how do we create meaning and what does, when we practically apply the 4 types of meaning that we just read about, are used when we are attempting a reading comprehension or when we are reading a work. What does the word hegemonize mean? Where did we come across the word hegemonize? We came across the word hegemonize in our first paragraph, when it was pointed out that the news industry is no longer in control of its future. Why? Because it is the technology companies like Google and social media that led the way and look set to hegemonize the public space. So what would the term hegemonize mean? Hegemonize in this context would mean dominate. Then which of the following statements are true? Is it the economic slowdown which is impacting the newsroom? Social media has taken over public space. A rise of online social networks have helped the news media. Which of the options amongst these three options is correct? Is it 1 and 3? Option C. Is it 1 and 2? Option A. Is it 2 and 3? Option 2 and 3. So as we did go across the passage that we just read, nowhere is it pointed out that the economic, the rise in social media networks have helped the news media. This, when we are drawing logic, we can logically make it out when we read this statement. This is the minor any statement, any sentence has, or any paragraph, not a sentence, but any paragraph has minor minor supporting sentences, minor supports, which is of course the supporting sentences, also known as supporting sentences, and the major clause or the major idea, major the major sentence, which is the central idea. So the statement starts with that we are talking about, what is the central theme? That we are talking about the news media crisis across the developed world. And as a support to this sentence, we have right by the end of the paragraph, it is given to us that the technology companies, which directly is proportional to that the social media platforms are looking set to hegemonize the public space. So what two options would be correct in this context? It would be option 1 and 2. Now coming to question number 3, according to Christopher Race, what impacted the media most? Is it the economic slowdown, impact of cyber media, loss of advertising revenue? All these three we come across when we are looking at the 6 right here, the 6 key areas that has been given after the annual survey. Now, as a quantifiable data, what would a survey mean? Right, it has been surveyed after interviews, after data collection, and what has been found out. These are the 6 key areas that they are talking about, and in these 6 key areas, it has been clearly specified that all these 3 has impacted the media most. So all of them are correct. Which of the following statement is true? The developed world also saw similar fate as the developed world. Developing world also saw the similar fate of media as the developed world. Now this would be going beyond what the writer has given to us in this particular work. The writer has not, in this particular piece of work that we're reading, has not implied that he's talking about the fate of the modern world and is comparing it to the fate of the media in the modern world. So this statement is false. Internet has made it possible for media to reach larger number of people. Yes, it is implied. How do we come across it? When we are talking about the terms, it is widely dispersed. That the gathering and distribution of news is now widely dispersed. And why? Because the influential news network divisions are also evolving with the changing public space for media. So this statement is true. Now the third statement, the economic foundation of the US media is collapsing. Right here, it is quite clearly directly given to us that it is in the paragraph that it is collapsing right here. So what two statements are true here? It is 2 and 3, option number 2 and 3. Now, the state of audio visual media, especially television, is similar to that of other traditional media. Is it true or false? It is true, right? And how do we come across it? So you'll have to, once you read the study material on your own again and this particular passage, please find out how is this statement true. But I would, before I proceed with the next component of our discussion today, point this out to you that please keep in view that this was not implied. This was not implied. So when you read a piece of work, if this is not implied, had there been any sort of referential meaning, referential or connotative suggestion even, we could have said that if it is not direct, let's say it is indirectly pointed out, we could have said that this statement is true too. But in this case, while it is also this question wants you to evaluate if you have got the subtleties or the minute detail of the work that you're reading. It is implied, right? That is why I said that statement is true. So how is it implied? You'll have to figure out where is it implied. Is it paragraph 2? Is it paragraph, sorry, it is if it is the last paragraph or if it is the second last paragraph. So coming back again to the types of meanings we have 3 types of meanings. What are 4 types of meanings, and what are these 4 types of meanings? The grammatical meaning, going by the word; referential meaning, what has been referred to; connotative meaning, something that is abstract and is not associated with a certain word, but it is the value that is associated with that certain word. Then the socio-cultural meaning, it is how the phrase or the expression is socio-culturally situated. Here comes the role of reader. So as a reader, with your own viewpoint, how do you mix it to what has been written in that particular work while you're generating meaning? Okay, so how do we generate meaning? This question becomes important. How do we generate meaning? So in 1956, Benjamin Bloom headed a group of educational psychologists who developed a classification of levels of intellectual behavior important in learning. Bloom found that over 95% of the test questions students encounter require them to think only at the lowest possible level, the recall of information. Bloom identified 6 levels within the cognitive domain, which is the applying your ability to understand, comprehend, synthesize, analyze, and he gives us 6 possible levels of cognitive domain, from the simple recall or recognition of facts. So reading merely is not recalling or the recognition of facts. Rather, you read when you are able to also evaluate the work from the starting point, which is the recognition of facts. So what is knowledge according to this 1956 model, which was revised again in 2001? We're talking about the 1956 model, and when we are to the present definition as has been given in your study material, and as we are discussing and coming across the term meaning again and again, we look at how meaning and creative ability, creative thinking, critical evaluation was brought into this discussion in 2001 when this whole model that was given to us by Bloom in 1956 was revised. But let us begin with this model for now. This is the 1956 model. According to this model, what is knowledge? Knowledge is to arrange, define, duplicate. So we begin with defining. Then comprehending. How do we comprehend? We describe, we classify, we explain, we express, we locate, we recognize. How do we apply? We choose, we demonstrate, we employ, we operate, we practice. How do we analyze? We calculate, we criticize, we contrast, we compare. This is how we analyze. How do we synthesize? We synthesize when we are arranging so far whatever we have defined, whatever we have classified, whatever we have demonstrated, whatever we have calculated. Then we are able to synthesize. How do we synthesize? We synthesize by developing, by designing, by formulating. And finally, we come to evaluation. What is evaluation? Where we argue, where we predict, where we judge, where we support, where we value, where we evaluate. Okay. So in your in the year 2001, Dr. Krathwohl and L.W. Anderson revised Bloom's taxonomy. So the term that was given to us in synthesis as a part of synthesis was brought in place of evaluation. So evaluation right here. So evaluation now is the second last process before creation of meaning. Okay. Now you would have to ask that we of course we are creating meaning. We do get it. It is quite understandable from what we are discussing that when we are creating meaning is when we are able to read, right? But how does it happen? Right. Interestingly, there is an entire process for reading that we have, and this process of reading is divided into three activities. And what are these three activities of reading? It is pre-reading activities. What are the pre-reading activities? It is the first and the foremost stage, which is also known as the initial stage, which is where we are learning the language. Okay. So this is your pre-reading activity. Let's say not in the context, not take, okay, one more example of it. Along with learning the language would be where you are defining. Where you're talking about the title, the subtitle, the subsections, guessing the main idea, guessing the sub-ideas. This is defined as your pre-reading activity. Then comes your activity when you're reading the work. This is known as while reading activity. What is while reading activity? While reading activity is both intensive and extensive reading. You are fulfilling your role as a reader. You are trying to find out the main idea of the content, and after finding out the main idea of the content, you are also able to comprehend it, right? But what is expected of a reader comes in your post reading activity. While it also happens, it of course happens when you are reading too, while you are reading too, right? Comprehension is also happening while you, but then this extends to the post reading activity also, where the reader makes certain that the questions that he or she came across while reading the work is is properly evaluated. So either with the help of your teacher or with the help of a guided reading material, you are able to answer those questions that you came across when you were reading the work, right? And after your post reading activity, you are able to formulate and actually design your opinion. So keeping this in view, we were given this reformulation of Bloom's taxonomy. Taxonomy simply means classification in 2001. So what was changed in this taxonomy is that earlier the first if you'll come here, knowledge is right at the initial stage. What is knowledge according to Bloom? Knowledge is to arrange and define. So knowledge now is being defined as to recognize or recall knowledge from memory. Remembering is when memory is used to produce or retrieve definition, facts or list, or to recite previously learned information. So now knowledge has become remembering. Comprehension has been defined as understanding, constructing a meaning. Then comes application is here to it is applying, but applying is where you are creating referential meaning. Your applying relates to or refers to situation where learned material is used through products like models, presentations, interviews, etc. Then analysis, analyzing is breaking of materials and concepts into parts, determining how the parts relate to one another. Okay. Then comes your evaluation. Evaluation is the term that is being used in the revised model instead of synthesis. So while you are evaluating, you are checking and you are critiquing. You are demonstrating what you have read, and you are creating something while you are accommodating, while you are checking, while you are in that process of developing your own judgments. So finally is the sixth revision, that is creating. Instead of evaluation, we have create as in the top of the hierarchy. And what is creating? Creating would be putting the elements that you have come across after you have defined, after you have classified, after you have applied it, after you have demonstrated it, after you have comprehended it, after you have evaluated it, synthesized it. You then put all these things together as a functional whole. This is creating, and this is actually what reading is. So when we read, while we were reading, as we were reading the passage that we just read, we, while answering the questions, had to go back again and find out where from this question has been asked. And in creating the meaning, we evaluated, we comprehended. We started with comprehension, right? And then we evaluated it, we synthesized the information that we had, and then we evaluated it and finally created a meaning. Okay, yeah, so this is what it means. So let us look at two more examples from your reading material. The first is this reading comprehension. For this reading comprehension, the answer has already been given in your study material. So I am not doing this reading comprehension with you. So the questions that have been asked in this reading comprehension, the answer for it is given here. Rather, we'll come to the last reading comprehension. The old man pressed his granddaughter's face against the chest. Quiet, he whispered urgently. Don't move. If you do, we are lost. The mob came rushing down the road, shouting slogans. The old man drew his arm protectively around the little girl's shoulder. Don't cry, he whispered. They will not find us here. Suddenly, someone kicked the door open. It banged against the cement wall. Framed in the open doorway, against a red sky, stood two men. Behind them, houses burned and the sky was thick with smoke. Can you see anyone? Asked the shorter of the two. Not yet, was the reply. A torch flashed. Its beam pierced the semi-darkness of the shed. The old man shrank back against the stacks of firewood, hoping that the empty drums in front would hide them from the searching light. Eyes wide with terror, he watched the light sweep over the piles of wood, probing the piles of charcoal. Drawing closer and closer, the powerful beam hit him in the eyes. His eyes caught the face of the tall, dark man. For a moment, their eyes met and held. He knew the man. He knew him very well. His neighbor's son, his friend. But that didn't seem to matter. Not now, not anymore. What mattered now was religion, to share the same belief in the same God. The old man closed his eyes and turned his face away, trapped, caught. Too late to run, too late to pray, too late for anything, time to die. Do you see anything? The shorter pushed past. Is anybody inside? The old man held his breath, with his eyes shut, his heart thumping wildly under his sweat-stained shirt. He waited. After what seemed an eternity, the tall man's words reached him. They came from far away. No, let's go. There is nobody here. And the shed plunged into darkness once again. At the beginning of the story, what makes the old man feel that he and his granddaughter are safe? You already have the study material with you. Let's discuss the answers for this passage at the beginning of and please type your answers in the questionnaire box, in the chat box or in the questionnaire box. I have also posted the link for the drive link where you can access the material, since some of you informed me that ma'am, am I still pre-live? Hello. Ma'am, are you there? Neeta ma'am, hello. Ma'am, am I still pre-live?